Good morning and thanks very much for joining us for this year's training conference. A big thank you also to both Raymarine and Gallagher for their support once again in supporting and partnering with our training conference. Their support has meant that we've been able to provide this virtual event to you free of charge. We remain extremely grateful to them for their ongoing partnerships with us. This presentation is actually pre-recorded. The purpose of this is so that we can answer any questions you may have on our live Q&A function that you should be seeing on your screen. Myself and my colleagues will endeavour to get through as many of your questions as we can during the time available. When we sat down to deliver last year's virtual conference event, we were reasonably hopeful that it would be a one-off and that this year we would be seeing you in person. Sadly, that was not to be, and we find ourselves still dealing with the impacts of a global pandemic which continues to impact different parts of the world and therefore different parts of the RYA training network to various levels. Whilst we don't wish to dwell on it, it is important to talk about the year just gone, what went well, what challenges we all faced, and to compare and contrast the various training schemes and also the struggles faced in different parts of the network. So let's begin with that filthy B word, Brexit. We've now lived in a post-Brexit world for just over 13 months. Whilst the sky hasn't fallen and the world hasn't stopped turning, there have certainly been some very serious impacts. Despite having written to all relevant European maritime authorities in the years leading up to Brexit to engage in conversation regarding RYA qualifications, we are yet to receive a single response. In reality, in terms of qualifications, very little has changed, either with leisure or commercial qualifications in the majority of countries. For the most part, those who previously accepted RYA course completion certificates, ICCs or commercial qualifications still do. Those who didn't, still don't. However, there was some notable Brit bashing in the early days, with Spain in particular effectively refusing acceptance of virtually any RYA leisure or commercial qualifications following a change of their regulations published on the 28th of December, just 3 days prior to Brexit taking effect. We worked closely with the MCA, some of our Spanish-based centres and the British Consulate to have the situation reconsidered by the Spanish authorities. We also encouraged operators and other key stakeholders to collaborate with the Spanish industry body ANEN to voice their concerns. Eventually, the authorities amended their decision concerning leisure qualifications, and finally, by June 2021, they'd also rolled back at least some of their regulations concerning RYA commercial qualifications and the use of UK flagged vessels. Whilst the situation is certainly not fully resolved, it is definitely more workable than it was. Other qualification-related issues appear for the most part to be opportunistic and mostly very localised within a specific port. Other challenges remain around uncertainty over the ability of UK nationals to work in European countries in the short and medium terms, and what visas they may need to do so. In most cases, the answers remain unclear, and we continue to work with European immigration advisors to seek answers. In many cases, however, those answers have not yet been written by the EU countries in question. Another challenge has been the shipping of training materials and publications to our centres and other customers in the EU following the changes to customs procedures. Whilst this has improved a little, we are aware that in some countries challenges remain, and we strongly advise that centres in EU countries in particular carry a little more stock than they might have done historically to safeguard against delays with customs. We have also encountered a fair number of malicious and/or spurious rumours in recent months. For example, super yachts in Italy and their agents have contacted us to advise that they have been informed that Italian authorities will no longer accept the RYA Personal Watercraft Safety Certificate for use by guests on board those vessels in Italian waters. However, as we chase back each of these reports, we are unable to find any local or national authority that has issued such change to their regulations. In short, the promulgation of unfounded rumours has the potential to do as much damage as changes in legislation itself. We do expect the situation in Europe to continue to settle, but it will certainly take time to do so. The fact is, operating an RYA centre in Europe now faces similar challenges to those encountered in the 30 or so non-EU overseas locations in which our centres operate. It's made a little more unpalatable on the basis that prior to Brexit, for the most part, operating in the EU was largely similar to operating in the UK, at least in terms of movement of people, goods, and rights to work. Let's talk now about the pandemic. The impact of coronavirus on our centres over the last 12 months has varied drastically from one centre to the next. While some training centres in the UK have found it difficult to operate due to staffing or volunteer shortages, or due to their location or other factors, I am really delighted to say that for the most part, UK centres in 2021 had a bumper year. Many I've spoken to have had one of their best seasons ever, and that's certainly reflected in UK activity levels on the water and also in certificate sales in some of our schemes. Overseas, the situation has varied drastically from one country to another, as each country moves through each stage of the pandemic at its own unique pace. In some locations, lockdowns have meant months of inability to trade, whilst in others, training has continued unimpeded. There's no doubt that every single centre has been impacted to a greater or lesser extent by restrictions on travel, whether that is an inability for potential students to travel to a country for a holiday or training, or whether it's the inability of examiners to travel to an overseas location for an exam. Those impacts are reducing, but they are certainly taking their time to go away. Early in 2021, we did see the loss of a number of our training centres. Some were impacted by coronavirus, some by Brexit, and some by a combination of the two. For others, personal circumstances of owners, principals, or chief instructors have forced them to cease operations due to their own health concerns. However, it's really encouraging that by the end of 2021, our centre numbers had grown by around 50% of the number that we had previously lost. We regained a number of former centres, along with some centres gaining RYA recognition for the first time. Sadly, we also saw a decrease in our numbers of instructors and our appointment holders. Some long-serving members of our training schemes left due to concerns over instructing during the pandemic, whilst others needed to look elsewhere to earn an income due to there being little training work available for them. Our inability to deliver instructor training through most of 2020 and some of 2021 meant that we didn't have the usual influx of new instructors to our schemes for almost 18 months. I am pleased to say that with instructor training back in full swing over the last 8 months or so, we are slowly moving back towards a full complement of instructors for our schemes. We have taken as pragmatic a view as possible with regards instructor revalidations, extending them significantly to allow instructors to retain their qualifications. However, instructors will ultimately need to revalidate to remain current. We've also dealt with training centres on a case-by-case basis, and for those centres that feel ready to once again deliver training, we are happy to chat through what options there are for regaining RYA training recognition. So whilst all of our centres have been through the ringer over the last 22 months or so, for the most part the training network has survived and is in reasonable shape to respond to the opportunities and challenges of 2022. One thing I would like to mention is the need to take care of your instructors, your boats and equipment, and yourselves. Having worked so hard in 2021 to make up for lost earnings the previous season, many centres found themselves stretched absolutely to their limits. Instructors worked back-to-back courses, boats were working harder than ever before. We certainly did see some evidence of instructor burnout last year. So please do take the time to ensure that your team, yourselves, and your equipment are not only ready for the season ahead, but also that there is sufficient downtime factored in to your operation to ensure that boats can be maintained and instructors rested. Every person on the planet has been impacted by the pandemic, some more so than others. We are certainly aware of the stress and frustration that our instructors and centres have been under. I would ask, however, when you make contact with us in the office, please remember that we are all on the same team. Despite whatever challenges you may be faced with, it is absolutely never acceptable for one of our training centre principals or instructors to shout at or abuse a member of RYA staff. Our staff team have worked tirelessly over the last 22 months, and whilst things have not always gone smoothly, they've worked toward a common goal of supporting you and your customers. So please remember that when you pick up the phone. A please and thank you will be far more appreciated than a stream of abuse, foul language, as various team members have faced in recent months. I'm just going to talk briefly about RYA financials. The 2020 and 2021 financial year ended better for the RYA than we had feared. Whilst the organisation did make a loss for the year, it was certainly not to the extent that we had feared it might be when the pandemic initially hit. I'm pleased to say that 2021-22 financial year has been an improvement on the previous one. Whilst we are still forecast to make a small loss this year, we are well positioned to start the new financial year positively. The organisation is financially secure. You may note that the cost of centre recognition and, for the most part, training certificates and materials have not increased this year, yet again, nor have exam fees. We've held these prices for now in a climate where we know instructors and training centres are stretched. Hopefully that will provide some breathing space for this year. Right, now we move on to the Trinity House RYA Yachtmaster Scholarship. During 2021, there were another 9 successful applicants for this Trinity House Scholarship. Each year, Trinity House contributes up to £30,000 to assist those with a demonstrated commitment to the boating industry who wish either to enter the small commercial vessel sector or, for those already working in it, to progress their careers through further training and qualifications. It's really exciting to see that so far 70% of successful applicants have been female, and the majority have come from a water sports instructing background. Please ensure that you pass on the details of this scholarship to anyone that you feel may be deserving of a leg up in trying to get started in the industry. There are details on both the RYA Training and Trinity House websites. We've certainly faced some personnel changes in the RYA in recent times. Over the last 6 months, we've seen a number of people move on. Sarah Tressida has left after almost 12 years as CEO and has taken up the helm of the UK Chamber of Shipping. To keep things simple, we've even managed to recruit a new CEO by the name of Sarah, in this case, Sarah Sutcliffe. Sarah started with us 4 weeks ago and brings with her a vast amount of experience in sports management and administration, and we're delighted to have her leading us. She will be saying hello to you shortly. A number of key support staff have also moved on from the RYA, from areas such as finance, digital and HR. This churn of staff, whilst regrettable, is something that's being experienced by most organisations at present. In the training department, we've lost 2 staff to resignations and a further 3 who have been promoted to new roles elsewhere within the organisation. So you may well be speaking to someone new if you're calling in about e-learning, centre recognition, or about one of the training schemes. Please do be patient as these new team members settle in. We continue to trial a hybrid working model with a mixture of office-based work and home-based work. We'll be reviewing this in spring to assess whether it's a suitable way of working for the future. It's obviously important we provide the same levels of service to you whether we're in the office or from home. Some of you will know that the RYA underwent what we referred to as a digital transformation through 2020 and 2021. In essence, we had to replace all of our digital core platforms, including our website, as they were all very close to the end of their lives and were no longer going to be supported. The timing was absolutely horrendous, with the entire build having to take place during the pandemic and thus remotely. Despite a vast amount of work by both external providers and RYA staff to test the various functionalities of the new platform, there were significant problems and faults when the platform went live in late spring of 2021. For this, we apologise. Unfortunately, the launch date could not be pushed back any further without creating a really severe risk of the entire existing platform collapsing. The good news is that we now have a digital platform upon which we can build for the future and which provides us with an immense amount of opportunity to improve our knowledge of those who interact with us. We have a new digital team starting in various roles, and they have a very busy time ahead of them as they start to take advantage of the new platform. But more on that in a moment. And now we're going to talk about the future. We've talked about the past, but what does the next year or two look like? Whilst it may be hard to believe, there has actually been some good to come from the pandemic. Both in the UK and in various locations around the world, people who are used to travelling for their major holidays each year have found themselves unable to do so. As predicted, these travel restrictions led to a huge increase in what has been dubbed staycationing, in effect, holidaying close to home. In some cases, people simply camped or stayed at relatively local venues. In other cases, they actually remained in their own homes. The common thread, though, is that literally millions of people tried one or more new activities. For many of them, that was a boating activity. And in a very good proportion of those cases, that involved an RYA training course. This was absolutely fantastic news for our UK centres and abroad. Importantly, it was great news for boating, as a whole raft of people who had never previously considered going afloat suddenly found themselves on a powerboat, in a dinghy, or on a personal watercraft. We're quite confident that this pattern will continue through 2022 as the pandemic lingers, but with a lessening effect. This leads us really nicely into a discussion about our EDI, or Equality, Diversity and Inclusivity strategy, that was launched during 2021. A look at almost any sailing club, training centre, or indeed instructor conference makes it clear to any casual observer that boating in the UK has always attracted participants from a fairly narrow section of society. Many areas of boating are struggling for participants, and if we had continued along the same lines, trying to appeal to an ever-diminishing audience, we would steadily head towards the point of irrelevance as far as boating activity is concerned. Therefore, not only is it morally the right thing to do to ensure the principles of equality, diversity and inclusivity are embedded in our activities, it's just plain common sense. Are you still promoting your courses on the same old websites or in the same magazines to the same people who you always have? Have you considered promoting your courses to local disabled groups, to more ethnically diverse communities, or to those of different genders to your regular customers? If not, now is a great time to start. We're in a climate where our competitors are no longer the training centre down the river from us, but rather the myriad of other options that everyone has available to them these days on which to spend their time and their money. The time is long overdue for us to be moving forward and working to attract entirely new audiences to our activities. Quite likely audiences that may be nervous about dipping their toe in the water. So please have a long, hard think about broadening your appeal to a wider group of customers or members than you may have done in the past. Make sure you open your doors and make sure that you make these newcomers know that they are welcome and that there is a place for them in your club or your training centre and on the water in general. One piece of information that comes back from surveys year after year after year about why people may be reluctant to try boating is that they're afraid. afraid of embarrassing themselves, afraid they won't like it, afraid for their safety, and afraid of a host of other things. In some cases, particularly on larger boats, the investment for an initial course is a pretty hefty one. For many, this will be too big a commitment for them without knowing whether they will enjoy it or not. This is where the concept of taster sessions or try boating sessions comes in. You can call it what you will, but the concept of letting potential customers have a brief try of an activity, either free of charge or for a very, very nominal amount, is a well-established one. The scuba diving industry has been doing it for more than 40 years. Our own dinghy scheme has also been offering taster sessions for a long, long time, as do some of our more forward-thinking schools in other disciplines. You may wish to consider offering a free or low-cost opportunity for those potential customers who really aren't sure if they're ready to commit, the opportunity to have a go. Put your most personable instructors on the job and make sure that their one brief is for everyone to have a fun time. You might even consider incentivizing them for each course that they manage to get a sign up for. For those of you who are UK-based and may be interested in developing your digital marketing skills further, there are some free courses and resources available to you through CIMSPA. That's the Chartered Institute for the Management of Sport and Physical Activity, a catchy title, I know. Simply Google the CIMSPA Digital Marketing Hub to find out how to access these. Another area of focus in the next year or two will be the opportunities in the area of what is referred to as pay and play. Traditional boat ownership and even club membership has certainly changed in recent years and in many cases is on the decline, as people tend to wish to dip in and out of multiple activities rather than being tied to a single hobby or sport. An area of boating that has seen significant growth in recent years is that of pay and play, where people may choose to access boating by paying for an event. For example, buying a crew position on a boat for Cows Week. Alternately, they may get involved in fractional boat ownership, effectively boat timeshare. Rather than seeing these activities and business models as threats, we need to identify how we can work with these concepts to convert people who dabble in boating to become more heavily involved and ideally better trained. Experiential learning through weekends on a boat or a mess about of an evening is just as important as the structured element of learning that RYA training is so well known for. You may also have seen the announcement of the launch of the RYA's sustainability strategy last year. We're beginning the journey of examining absolutely everything we do, not only as an organisation, but as a boating community. Our strategy will have us looking not only at our own practices as an organisation, but also making sure that we're influencing all of our stakeholders to ensure that our activities are sustainable into the future. As the educators of tomorrow's boaters, you will need to be heavily engaged in showing your students what good looks like when it comes to using our waterways responsibly. You'll see inclusions in our publications starting to filter through in the years ahead, as well as additions to our course syllabi to ensure that we are conveying the message about sustainability appropriately. Most importantly, we all need to lead by example. The days of tossing your cigarette butts and orange peels off the back of the boat during a course for students to see are long gone. In the short term, this is about good practice in waste disposal, avoiding spillages, not anchoring in areas where you may harm the ecology of the seabed, and so on. But in the medium term, this is a far more holistic issue where we will need to be considering alternate energy sources and propulsion systems for our vessels. To that end, you will see more and more discussion around electric engines as we watch developments rapidly taking place in that area. They're not there yet, but the rate of development is absolutely astonishing. The issue of sustainability will become more and more pivotal in the years ahead. Let's get ahead of it. We're now going to talk about the digital world. So whilst we certainly suffered some significant pain last year as the digital transformation was implemented, we're now ready to start using that platform to build for the future. One of our key motivations for wishing to upgrade our platform was to ensure that we are able to move our business practices and processes into the 21st century. You've already seen things such as ICC applications and SRC payments move to an online format. Our intention is that Yachtmaster exam payments will soon follow suit, and ultimately so too will the Yachtmaster exam application forms and exam reports. Annual inspection reports for centres will ideally also end up online. Each and every process that we can streamline and digitise will ultimately improve the experience of everyone who interacts with us. None of this will happen overnight, but it will happen, and it will ultimately make your lives significantly easier. Please bear with us while we work our way through that. I want to just talk a little about innovation as well. Most of you all know that we launched our foiling dinghy and windsurfing courses 5 or 6 years ago now. This was not done because we thought we would suddenly have thousands of people foiling. It was actually done as a means of providing a new element to the sport for some who had been sailing for years and were perhaps feeling a little stale. It was also done as a means of attracting new people to the sport through the exciting imagery that foiling provides and providing aspirations for newcomers. Last year, Amanda Van Santen, her scheme administrator, Molly Nolden, and a small team of trainers have worked on and launched a pilot for wingboarding and wing foiling. This activity has been around for a few years now, but is just now really starting to take off. It's a relatively low-cost activity and can see the user reach a point of reasonable proficiency fairly quickly. I am very pleased to say that the pilot scheme in 2021 was hugely successful, and as a result we will be rolling this out for inclusion as an RYA training scheme this year. The official public launch will occur at the RYA Dinghy and Watersports Show later this month, but you heard it here first. This gives clubs and commercial training centres yet another activity to promote to the general public should they wish to do so. We also had the opportunity through the pandemic for updating and modernising. There was an impetus there for us to try some new and innovative ways of tackling things. Shore-based instructor courses and Yachtmaster examiner revalidations, for example, can now be done via video conferencing. At the moment, we're still allowing centres to deliver some elements of shore-based courses via video conferencing, although we will review that during this year. We've also changed the structure of some of our instructor courses, with dinghy instructors currently able to do their course in 2 parts, single-handed boats and then topping up with double-handers later on. All of these things have been born of necessity to find ways of helping centres operate through the restrictions of the pandemic. But some of these measures will be dispensed with over time as the world settles down a little. However, some of them will remain, at least as options, to make instructor training and revalidating more accessible, more inviting, more cost-effective, and more environmentally friendly for the future. Another area that's about to receive a very thorough overhaul is that of our navigation courses. You'll hear more detail later, but in essence, it is really essential that we make our courses more representative of the way people actually navigate with the equipment they have, rather than focusing on the way we might traditionally have liked them to navigate. We're not about to get rid of paper altogether, but if we're to remain relevant, we need to embrace the world of electronic navigation far more fully than we have in the past, as well as challenging ourselves on the weighting of some of the subjects within our course syllabi. The review of these courses will dovetail nicely into our long overdue need to review and update our radar course. Again, these will not happen overnight, but work is commencing on them this month, and it's an exciting time to be engaged in this area. I've titled this next bit, "We Need to Be Better Than Ever." I'm sure you will have noticed in recent months, after a year or two of pandemic, lockdowns, and altered lifestyles, that many people are becoming short-tempered, easily frustrated, and very quick to complain. Gone is the largely supportive and understanding approach that we saw from customers and others during the early stages of the coronavirus pandemic. It's now been replaced by Mr. or Mrs. Angry, who shouts first and listens later, if at all. In short, people's expectations have changed and they've become far less tolerant than ever before, almost regardless of how trivial the issue may be. For this reason, it's more important than ever before. Firstly, that what we do well. Whether that's taking the booking, processing the payment, or sending the joining instructions, not to mention the quality of the course and the equipment being used. Secondly, if someone does raise an issue with you, stop and listen. Do not leap to a defensive position. While something may seem very trivial to you, it may be quite significant to someone new to boating. Alternatively, it may be masking a more serious issue that's underlying. Please take the time to listen to the customer and to try and resolve the problem. Simply ignoring problems or complaints and hoping that they'll go away is just not acceptable in this day and age. Interestingly, the pattern of who we're training and qualifying continues to change. This is particularly true in the area of Yachtmaster and the Sail and Motor Scheme in general, along with Advanced Powerboat Scheme. About 20 years ago, 25% of Yachtmaster exam candidates intended to use their qualifications for commercial use. That number has now grown to a whopping 80%. We have somewhere in the order of 25,000 people working with RYA commercially endorsed qualifications in locations all over the world. This is obviously fantastic news, but one of the consequences of this is that the quality and consistency of our training and examinations is under closer scrutiny by authorities, both in the UK and abroad, than ever before. The quality and integrity of our training schemes has never been more important, and it lies predominantly in the hands of you, our training centres and instructors. We are continuing to see some problems with logistics, both of inbound stock to our warehouse for certificates, publications and training materials, as well as outbound delays in your orders reaching you. For this reason, as well as contributing to our efforts in sustainability, over the next few years, we'll be bringing all of our manufacturing and printing into the UK, rather than China, where it currently sits. This will incur some cost increases, but it will safeguard our ability to supply you with goods when you need them, as well as reducing our own carbon footprint. Steen Ingerslev will provide you with some more details on this later. There is absolutely no doubt that the year ahead will hold some challenges for us. We will continue to see impacts from the pandemic and from Brexit. Internally within training, we will deal with the challenges of having a significant number of new team members in the department. Our instructors will deal with the challenges of activity not quite being at the levels they were in some areas, or questions over whether there will be activity in certain areas, such as within parts of Europe. Our training centres will deal with changes in their customer base, as well as further pressure from inflation as world economies shift gear. Despite all of that, we are well positioned to face the new year as a training network. We have some exciting and innovative developments in place, and we have very clear plans about what we need to focus on next in order to ensure you have the right training products and resources to support what you do best, instructing and educating in all forms of boating. Thank you for all that you do. I hope you continue to take great pride in being a part of the RYA training network and family. I most certainly do. Thanks also for taking the time to participate in this event. With a little bit of luck, we'll be seeing many of you in person this time next year. I wish you all the very, very best for a safe and successful 2022. Thank you.